This has always been a suspenseful time of year for the Jewish people. Certainly, the idea of the closing gates that we have until the sun sets tonight to rise from these spiritual depths of our teshuvah and begin life anew, that adds a bit of pressure. But that is actually not the only or even the most powerful reason for our suspense through the ages. Actually, it is because of water. Since the very beginning of our people's history, we have been deeply focused, even obsessed, with the presence or absence of water. Most civilizations in the ancient Near East were sustained by rivers. The Egyptians, of course, had the Nile. The Sumerians, Assyrians, Babylonians had the Tigris and Euphrates. But Israel didn't have such river access and was therefore almost entirely dependent upon rain. Around this time of year, at the end of the dry season in the land of Canaan, the trepidation would grow. If the rains came at the right time, in the right amount, the people would survive. Their harvest would be plentiful, and they would know that God was with them. If not, they would feel abandoned, and their very lives would hang by a thread. This connection between God and God's presence and water is also embedded within our most ancient stories. In the Torah, water, mayim in Hebrew, is one of the elements that doesn't have a specific day of creation. It is there from the very start. It's mentioned in the second verse of the entire Torah. The earth was unformed and void, and darkness was on the surface of the deep. V'ruach Elohim merachefet al panei hamayim. And the wind of God, God's ruach, God's essence, swept across the surface of the mayim, the water. Before God creates the world, God is alone in the unformed universe with one element: water. Water is God's only witness when God says, "Let there be light," and creates the rest of the world. And in later passages, it is the mayim, the water, that is God's tool for flooding the earth in the story of Noah, and it is the mayim that God parts to allow the Israelites to cross into freedom at the Red Sea, and it is the mayim that bars the Egyptians from following them, resulting in our redemption. The water's behavior was construed as a message of favor or not from God. And despite our huge scientific and technological advances over our ancient ancestors, we are more attuned to the centrality of water in our lives than we have been for generations. In recent years, we have watched in humbled awe flooding in the Northeast, torrential downpours in California, severe droughts affecting the water source of several states, and of course the rise in sea level across the globe that threatens millions of people living in those low-lying areas. And here in New Orleans, our everyday lives regularly consist of boil water advisories and suggestions to park on the neutral ground to avoid street flooding and hurricane tracking, and we are now bracing for the arrival of saltwater intrusion into the Mississippi River because of the lack of significant rainfall to deter it. Our relationship to water is not so unlike that of our ancient ancestors who understood, as we are beginning to more and more, that our lives are inextricably linked to the amount of water that comes to us from the heavens. The challenge for us, as it was for them, is how to relate to that connection in ways that give us strength and inspiration rather than just fear and trepidation. We relate to water issues predominantly, almost exclusively, in the language of the mechanical and the physical: where the water is, and how much there is, and what's in it, and how it can be moved and mitigated and managed. And this was absolutely true of ancient Israel as well. Sussing out the technicalities of water access was a huge part of their lives. But they also had another important mode through which to relate to water. At the same time as they built tunnels and irrigation systems and cisterns, they tended to their relationship with water spiritually, seeking to harness the water's mighty power through ritual in a way that both humbled and inspired them. Those rituals are still embedded in our Jewish tradition today, gesturing toward our ancestors' deep preoccupation with water. One example of this ritualization of water is our daily Gevurot prayer. The Amidah liturgy that we even sang this morning dances between the literal and the metaphorical, expressing thanksgiving for the right amount of water, rain, or dew in the season that enlivens a parched field, just as God's nourishing love enlivens us. The desperate need for water is expressed in this prayer, but so is the awe at all the ways that water and God's love, disguised as water, is already present, lifting the fallen, healing the sick, freeing the captive. Another example of this ritualization, the festival of Sukkot that we celebrate every year, is at its heart not only about the harvest, but about water. That rickety hut that we build is an invitation for the rains to come, and as is the waving of the lulav in the air. They are pleased to grant us the right amount of water for a good harvest in the year to come, as well as gestures of thanksgiving for the bounty we have enjoyed. Governor Edwards invited the public last week, if we pray, to pray for rain. I didn't have the opportunity to tell him while he was here this past Shabbat that in just a few days, the entire Jewish world will be doing just that. But one water ritual stands out from the rest as the most influential, and that is mikvah. Mikvah is a ritual bath of living natural water in which Jews immerse for purification, slipping completely underwater for just a few seconds at a time and saying the appropriate blessings. If you have toured the old city of Jerusalem, you have surely seen ancient mikvaot that were used by pilgrims as they cleansed themselves before approaching the Holy Temple. Mikvah is the source of the Christian tradition of baptism, and it has been a staple of Jewish life for thousands of years. Mikvah evolved to be used in several ways. Some, such as men immersing before Shabbat or holidays, contains an element of choice in it, an option. But two uses are strictly mandated by Jewish law. First, mikvah has always been a part of conversion to Judaism, the final ritual of a process consisting of significant periods of study and a hearing with a Beit Din, a group of 3 learned Jews. The 3 brief immersions taken by the convert in the mikvah signify a rebirth for the individual as a child not only of their parents, but of Abraham and Sarah as well, thereby fully becoming part of the Jewish people. And second, most famously, mikvah was and is the responsibility of Jewish women who are required to perform this mitzvah of immersion before their wedding and after childbirth and a week after the end of their menstrual periods each month, in order that they purify themselves to be sexually available to their husbands, a tradition called family purity laws, or nidah. So through the centuries, along with the traditional uses for men and those who are converting, mikvah has predominantly been the domain of married women, observing nidah, whose bodies were essential to the continuity of their people. As you may know, thanks to the years-long efforts of many in this community, even some in this very sanctuary, and including especially Rabbi Bob Lowy and Bobby Guerin, visionary funders within the Toro community and beyond, and a core group of devoted professionals, artists, and builders, and the support of the Oscar J. Thomas Charitable Trust, our community is now home to the Oscar J. Thomas Community Mikveh, located on the campus of Congregation Shir Hadash in Metairie. This mikveh is jointly owned by all the Jewish congregations in New Orleans, including Toro Synagogue. With the establishment of this new space, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to consider our relationship to it, which is not an uncomplicated matter for an egalitarian, religiously progressive community like ours. And that is because While mikveh has consistently remained a very important part of life for Orthodox communities in which Jewish law is considered binding, there has been very little resonance with mikveh for non-Orthodox Jewish communities in the last few hundred years. Unbound by Jewish law as we are, non-Orthodox women have seldom observed nidah, and so have had very little relationship with and really seem to be almost indifferent to mikveh. Furthermore, the idea that women's fertility is a commodity to be dictated by Jewish laws overseen by male rabbis has understandably been perceived by egalitarian communities as oppressive and patriarchal. So beyond indifference that some may feel, there are currents of resentment and abhorrence for the tradition of mikveh within the religiously progressive Jewish community and those who have left Orthodoxy behind. And both this indifference and abhorrence resulted in the majority of the Jewish world distancing ourselves from the primary water ritual in our tradition, a custom that connects in visceral ways our own bodies and our prayers and water, God's messenger on earth. Our hesitation to incorporate mikveh into our religiously progressive lives is understandable and is a manifestation of our values. Our Reformed teachings have been unflinchingly egalitarian for several generations, and our modern sensibilities compel us to be skeptical of any institution that boxes women or any group into one lifestyle or one choice or one life purpose. Given these misgivings that are full of integrity, the presence of a mikveh in our community now might initially feel irrelevant to many of us, but it doesn't have to be irrelevant. Thanks to a bold group of theological pioneers who found a way for us to reconnect with what had truly always been ours and grant access to this important Jewish ritual for non-Orthodox Jews. About 2 generations ago, as Jewish feminism began to take hold in the 1970s and 80s, brilliant and courageous Jewish women began the process of reclaiming the ritual of mikveh. Electrified by the writing of then Orthodox theologian Rachel Adler in her 1971 article, The Jew Who Wasn't There, Halacha and the Jewish Woman, the first generation of female rabbis and their colleagues in academia blazed a trail that has changed the Jewish world. Gazing through the lens of feminism, they were able to see that mikveh had been underestimated, its power underutilized. For many Jewish women, though certainly not all, for some love the tradition, traditional uses of mikveh confined and silenced them. But these thinkers realized that mikveh could be a technology of empowerment as well. So they began to call it out and create change. In a stirring article from 1986 in Lilith magazine called Take Back the Water, Rabbi Elise Goldstein writes, quote, "For me, going to the mikveh became an experience of reappropriation. The mikveh has been taken from me as a Jewish woman by sexist interpretations, by my experiences with Orthodox family purity committees who run communal mikvaot as Orthodox monopolies, by a history of male biases, fears of menstruation, and superstitions. I was going to take back the water. To take back the water means to see mikveh as a holy female experience. The mikveh will give strength back to Jewish women. Water is the symbol of birth. Well, now it can be the symbol of rebirth," end quote. The movement that began by now Reformed Rabbi Rachel Adler has expanded the idea of mikveh from a religious obligation to a deeply meaningful ritual engaged in by a Jewish individual of any gender to mark important moments in their lives using the most potent element on earth. Mikveh has been revisioned as an experience that centers the user, where Jewish women and all Jews can connect to the life-giving, life-affirming power of water. Because of them, mikveh is now a place where one can know as they become one with the water. for a few seconds that they are a part of a great whole, that they are surrounded by the essential symbol of God's companionship, living water that came from the heavens itself. In a way, these mothers revision the mikveh as a tiny place of Olam Haba, the world to come, for each of us. For the last 18 years, there has been no space in New Orleans in which religiously progressive community members could experience and express the reclaiming of this ancient custom. Since Hurricane Katrina, reform and conservative conversion has taken place in the mikvaot of Houston or Memphis, or in the living waters, the very living waters of the lake and the Gulf, or in certain circumstances, swimming pools of generous congregants when there was nowhere else to go. And there was nowhere we could go to mark sacred occasions and seize this inheritance that was built for us. And it is almost precisely during the last 18 years that a dazzling array of liturgies has been developed to support creative uses of the mikveh as well as traditional ones, from marking the end of a course of chemotherapy to a 60th birthday to a graduation from college. In 2004, Mayim Chaim Living Waters Community Mikveh in Boston opened its doors and introduced the country, and really the entire world, to a space that, in the words of its founder, author Anita Diamond, quote, encourages the prayer in the heart of Jews of every denomination and description, a mikveh that would respect the choices and modesty of everyone who visits, a mikveh that would be beautiful in design and decoration, a welcoming and inviting place from the minute you walk through the door, end quote. For centuries, pregnancy and childbirth was the most mysterious and precarious human function. Water, as a symbol of life and birth, was united through the ritual of mikveh with that communal fear and compulsion. And the tradition of mikveh evolved to be a place where that unification came to be expressed. The two became inextricably linked. And this one use of the mikveh completely subsumed all others. And that is a loss for all of us. There is no doubt that issues of sexism and commodification and danger and perhaps even violence are interwoven with the history of mikveh throughout the ages, but this is not the reason to abandon the ritual. There are many who found it very beautiful from ancient times to this, and this trepidation we may have is an invitation to be a part of the reclaiming started by our modern matriarchs. This custom of ours, it belongs to us, and as a part of a chain of Reformed tradition of bringing a spirit of egalitarianism and thoughtfulness and creativity to ancient practices, it is incumbent upon us to make this new space in our community our own, to be full partners in the establishment of its culture along with every other denomination in town and every other congregation. In the same way that to make our voices heard in our democracy, we must show up to the polls and vote, this mikveh will be a place where every journey in our community is honored and the equality of sexes and genders is manifest if and only if we show up and make it so. On my first Yom Kippur as your senior rabbi in 2019, I brought you the following midrash. Nimshala tefillah kamikvah, v'nimshala teshuvah kayam. Prayer is like a mikveh, and teshuvah is like an ocean. The message of this text is that contained, intentional experiences like prayer and like mikveh can prepare us for endless, unpredictable spaces we are sure to enter in our lives, like societal and personal teshuvah, vast and unwieldy as the ocean. Our prayers, the mikveh of our ritual life, is a space for preparation for the work of teshuvah we must do in the wider world. The mysterious, the mystical, the spiritual is the head and heart space where we learn, metaphorically, to swim. And then we enter into the pitching, tossing waves and do the very best we can to grapple with the powerful waters and all that they represent. Unlike our ancestors, the great mystery in our complex world is not understanding a woman's biology and the world of procreation. Rather, the great mystery for us is the astounding diversity of our humanity and our inner landscape, the way we express ourselves, our struggles and traumas, our individual journeys, the strength we have to carry hard things, such as the knowledge of our vulnerability as a species, the deep sense of the miraculous that grows in us as we age. These comprise the great mystery for us. We are only just beginning to have the cultural language to speak about and lift up our appreciation of each person for who they are, no matter their ethnic background or cognitive style or physical appearance or sexual orientation or gender identity or vocation. We are striving in these times to reject the dehumanization and objectification that has abounded in previous eras in all walks of life, shaming so many of us into silence because we did not conform. It is the acknowledgement and processing of this mystery, that needs a spiritual and a ritual home in the mikveh, and then an actual home in our shared lives. And we are exactly the community to create it, because we are the ones committed to doing the teshuvah it will take to live it. The mikveh, the storehouse of living water, which is God's messenger and a symbol of God's presence on earth, can be a mirror, a reflecting pool for the way our community acknowledges the myriad of voices within it and grapples with its greatest mysteries. For centuries, that mirror was shrouded in exclusivity and rigidity. It represented a task to be completed, not an opportunity for spiritual awakening. But now that mirror will reflect an inclusivity that we all deserve, that we are trying to build together. And that can be part of our collective teshuvah, a remembrance of the kind of world we want to live in that hasn't always been possible, but is closer now to us than ever. If we make it so, the beautiful souls who have embraced Judaism in this synagogue and all our synagogues will finally feel that embrace of the water and the embrace of God that it represents. And not only that, if we make it so, we will have a place where the cancer survivor marking an end of his chemotherapy will feel the embrace. The Erev bat mitzvah, who is approaching her womanhood, will feel that embrace. The grooms preparing for their wedding will feel it. The mother acknowledging her weaning will feel it. The individual who is healing from trauma will feel it. The newly divorced person looking for a new start will feel it. Couples beginning a fertility journey will feel it. Couples ending a fertility journey will feel it. And all those observing the laws of Nidah will continue to feel it too. All these life experiences, as overwhelming in their power as water itself, will finally have a Jewish ritual space. There is surely no escape from the grand and mystical power of water. It was here before creation. And the technical challenges of learning to live with it are permanent parts of our lives, and thank God for the wise people amongst us who help us to do that. But that is all the more reason to be grateful for this water ritual we have inherited and the space our community has built to partake in it. As the suspense of our ancient ancestors regarding their relationship with water continues to pulse within us too, may we find gratitude that we have a container to explore it, to accept it, to process it, the suspense, and to let it go, if only for a few seconds of complete unison between an individual and the warm waters of the mikveh, the reflecting pool of our diverse humanity and the presence of God on earth. Good Yontif.